She told me, in a voice so calm it felt rehearsed, that she would dress however she pleased, talk to anyone she chose, and disappear whenever she felt like it. And if I didn't accept it, then I could walk away. There was no anger in her tone, no sadness, no hesitation, just a cold certainty that left no room for compromise. I stood there listening, feeling as though something inside me had finally reached its breaking point after months of silent endurance, and instead of arguing or pleading, I simply nodded. I picked up the old canvas bag I kept under the bed, the one with the torn zipper and faded logo, and began filling it while she continued adjusting her reflection in the mirror as if nothing important had just been said. She never turned around to see me leaving because she believed I never would, convinced that her freedom mattered more than my presence, and that my loyalty would keep me anchored no matter how far she drifted. I left without raising my voice, without slamming the door, without tears, and when she returned hours later, stumbling through the apartment with the night clinging to her clothes, she finally noticed the emptiness on my side of the room and the folded note resting on her pillow, the message clear and final in its simplicity. She had asked for this, and now it belonged to her. The last thing she ever truly said to me was not an apology or a confession of love, but a declaration disguised as empowerment, spoken as if independence meant the absence of accountability and connection was a burden rather than a bond. It was late in the week, and the air in the bedroom was thick with perfume and the faint metallic scent of hairspray, the same room we had once filled with laughter and careless plans. She stood in front of the tall mirror wearing a dress she had once promised to save for a meaningful moment, but now treated as just another outfit for another night away. For weeks, I had been watching her smile at her phone before hiding the screen, hearing about friends, whose names repeated with unsettling frequency, and noticing the way she returned home carrying unfamiliar smells that didn't belong to our life together. I had tried to speak gently, to ask if something was wrong, but every attempt was met with impatience and subtle dismissal, as if my concern were an inconvenience rather than an expression of care. That night, watching her prepare to leave again, something in me fractured silently, not in anger, but in a quiet understanding that the person I loved was no longer standing before me. When I finally asked where she was going, she met my eyes through the reflection, her gaze sharp and detached, applying her lipstick as if sealing a verdict rather than preparing for an evening out. She answered vaguely, with the same practiced tone she used whenever I questioned her growing distance, and when I mentioned the name that had begun appearing too often in her conversations, the atmosphere in the room changed. The hum of the light overhead felt louder, the silence heavier, and her posture shifted from casual to confrontational, as though she were waiting for me to challenge her so she could assert her control. Every word she spoke afterward felt deliberate, each one landing like a stone between us, reinforcing the invisible wall she had built. She claimed her choices were hers alone, that she owed no explanations, and that my discomfort was my own problem to solve. In that moment, I realized she was enjoying the power she held over my uncertainty, mistaking my devotion for weakness and my patience for permission. Her final words, the ones meant to restore her sense of dominance, were simple and devastating. If I didn't like it, I could leave. For a long moment, I only looked at her, remembering the person she had once been, the one who had laughed easily and trusted deeply, and then I saw how far that version had faded. Something settled inside me, a calm clarity that replaced the storm of emotions I had been carrying, and I nodded once, not in defeat but in acceptance. She seemed confused, her confidence wavering as she realized the response she expected. Anger, pleading, bargaining, was not coming. I moved past her without another word, retrieving my worn bag and placing it on the bed as I began collecting my belongings piece by piece, folding each item carefully as if closing a chapter rather than escaping a conflict. The room felt strangely quiet, as though it too understood that this was the end. She asked what I was doing, her voice losing its edge as disbelief crept in, but I did not answer. I continued packing, gathering the essentials that still felt like mine, leaving behind the shared symbols of a life that no longer existed. The bathroom, once cluttered with our routines, yielded only what I needed, and the nightstand held nothing worth taking except the book I had been reading and a photograph of my family. I left the images of us behind, not out of spite, but because they belonged to a story that had already concluded. She accused me of being dramatic, of acting out, but her words echoed uselessly against the wall of resolve I had built. In minutes, my presence was erased from the space we once shared, and she stood frozen, waiting for a scene that would never arrive, still dressed for a night she believed would end with my apology. Before I left the room, I noticed the small notepad she used for lists and quotes, and I wrote a short message on a clean page, folding it carefully and placing it on her pillow. I did not look at her as I walked away, even when she called after me, her voice rising from anger to panic as she realized the control she had assumed was slipping through her fingers. I collected my keys, my laptop, and stepped into the quiet night, the door closing behind me with a sound that felt final without being dramatic. The air outside was cool, grounding, and as I drove away, the building grew smaller in my mirror until it was just another shape in the darkness. The silence in the car was not empty. It was filled with the relief of certainty, the knowledge that I had chosen myself after years of choosing someone who no longer chose me. I drove without direction for a while, letting the city lights blur past as the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a hollow space that felt strangely peaceful. Eventually, I stopped at a small, anonymous hotel, the kind designed for passing through rather than staying, and carried my bag inside. The room smelled of cleaning solution and stale air, and I stood there listening to the faint hum of appliances, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle into my bones. I muted my phone, showered until the steam fogged the mirror, and changed into clothes that felt like my own again. Eating a late meal alone at the desk, I realized how long it had been since I had done something without fear of judgment or interruption. The simplicity of the moment felt like freedom. My phone lit up repeatedly, her name appearing again and again, followed by messages filled with confusion, irritation, and misplaced concern. She asked about missing items, demanded explanations, and accused me of immaturity, her focus never shifting from the inconvenience my absence caused her. I read them with detached curiosity, noticing how none of them asked how I felt or why I had left. When another call came hours later, I imagined her finally seeing the note, realizing the permanence of my decision, and I turned the phone face down, allowing myself to sleep deeply for the first time in months. In the days that followed, I dismantled our shared life through a series of quiet, practical steps, finding a small place of my own, transferring accounts, and erasing my name from everything that tied me to her. I resisted the urge to check her online presence until curiosity overcame me, revealing carefully curated images of forced happiness and hollow captions about freedom and self-discovery. A new face appeared beside hers, the proof of a choice she had made long before she admitted it. Instead of anger, I felt only a distant pity, recognizing how quickly admiration could be mistaken for love and how fragile validation truly was. I blocked her on every platform, choosing silence as my final boundary. Weeks later, her friends reached out, speaking of her unraveling with a mix of concern and gossip, urging me to fix what she had broken. I listened politely, understanding now that I had never been her partner, only the structure that held her chaos together. When I ended the call, I felt my resolve strengthen, my peace becoming something I would no longer surrender. Even when she tried again through unknown numbers and emotional messages, I remained silent, recognizing nostalgia as another form of manipulation. Each unanswered attempt reaffirmed that my life was no longer shaped by her needs. The last time I saw her, she stood outside my building in the rain, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered, pleading for another chance, promising change, offering to become the person I once loved. I listened calmly, explaining that the choice she had given me had already been made, and that the life I now lived did not include her. When I turned away and entered the warmth of my new world, I felt nothing but relief, knowing that the past had been acknowledged and released. The door closed, the rain faded into the background, and I walked forward unburdened, carrying only the certainty that I had finally chosen myself. The weeks that followed unfolded with an eerie quiet, the kind that feels almost artificial at first, as though the world is holding its breath to see whether you will collapse or stand taller. And in that stillness, I learned how much noise I had been living with before. My mornings no longer began with tension humming beneath the surface, no longer shaped by anticipation of disappointment or arguments disguised as jokes. I woke when I wanted, cooked what I liked, and moved through my small apartment without feeling like I had to justify every decision. The walls were bare, the furniture modest, but each corner carried the comfort of autonomy. I started running in the mornings, letting the steady rhythm of my breath replace the anxious loops that once filled my mind, and with each mile I felt something heavy peel away. There were moments when memories surfaced unexpectedly, but instead of drowning in them, I acknowledged them and let them pass, realizing they no longer had power over the present I was carefully building. As I settled into my new routines, I noticed subtle changes in how I carried myself, how strangers spoke to me, how the reflection in the mirror began to look more grounded and certain. I no longer scanned my phone with unease or hesitated before making plans. The absence of chaos made room for clarity, and clarity revealed how deeply I had compromised myself in the name of love. I spent evenings reading, journaling, and exploring parts of the city I had ignored, discovering cafes and quiet streets that felt like hidden sanctuaries. Each small act of independence reinforced the truth that leaving was not an escape, but a reclamation, a decision to prioritize my own well-being after years of shrinking myself to fit into someone else's narrative. Occasionally, fragments of the past attempted to resurface through mutual acquaintances or accidental reminders, but they no longer stirred the same emotional response. Instead, I observed them with a distant curiosity, as though they belonged to another lifetime entirely. I realized that healing was not a dramatic transformation but a series of subtle shifts, moments when I chose peace over familiarity, honesty over nostalgia, and growth over comfort. The space she once occupied was now filled with a deeper understanding of myself, a recognition that love should not require erasure or endurance of disrespect. Each day felt like a quiet affirmation that I had done the right thing, even when doubt whispered softly in the background. My confidence grew not from validation, but from consistency, from honoring my own boundaries and maintaining the life I had chosen. I volunteered at a local community center, finding purpose in helping others navigate their own transitions, and through their stories, I saw reflections of my own journey. The shared vulnerability created connections that felt genuine and supportive, reminding me that healing is often amplified through empathy. I learned that strength is not loud or dramatic. It is patient, steady, and deeply rooted in self-respect. In offering guidance, I found closure, realizing that my experience, once painful, now served as a source of insight and compassion. Time passed in gentle waves, each season bringing its own lessons and quiet joys, and with every milestone, I felt a renewed sense of gratitude for the life unfolding before me. I celebrated small victories, from mastering new recipes to reaching personal fitness goals, and each accomplishment reinforced the idea that fulfillment comes from within. The world no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a canvas waiting to be explored. I allowed myself to dream again, envisioning a future shaped by intention rather than fear, and for the first time in years, those dreams felt attainable. When new people entered my life, I approached them with openness tempered by wisdom, understanding that trust is built slowly and mutual respect is non-negotiable. Conversations flowed without the undercurrent of manipulation or insecurity, and I found comfort in the simplicity of genuine connection. I no longer felt the urge to prove my worth or chase approval. Instead, I stood firm in who I was becoming. Each interaction served as a reminder that love, when healthy, is not a negotiation but a shared journey grounded in mutual care. There were moments when I reflected on how easily I had once mistaken intensity for intimacy, confusion for passion, and endurance for loyalty. These realizations did not bring shame, but clarity, illuminating patterns I was now free to break. I embraced the lessons without clinging to the pain, understanding that growth often emerges from the most challenging experiences. The resilience I discovered within myself became a quiet source of pride, a testament to the strength that lies in choosing change over stagnation. As the months continued to pass, I felt increasingly aligned with the person I aspired to be, grounded in values that honored both my needs and those of others. I learned to celebrate solitude without loneliness, finding joy in my own company and appreciating the calm it brought. Each sunrise felt like an invitation to continue evolving, to remain curious, and to embrace the endless possibilities that life offers when fear no longer dictates your choices. The future no longer felt uncertain. It felt open and full of promise. One evening, as I watched the city lights flicker against the night sky, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had led me here. The pain that once defined me had transformed into strength, and the silence I once feared had become my sanctuary. I realized that freedom is not the absence of connection, but the presence of authenticity, the ability to live in alignment with your truth. The path ahead stretched wide and welcoming, and I stepped forward with confidence, carrying nothing but the lessons that had shaped me. In the end, I understood that leaving was not about rejection or revenge, but about choosing a life rooted in respect, clarity, and self-worth. The story that once revolved around loss had become one of renewal, and every chapter ahead held the promise of growth and fulfillment. I no longer looked back with longing or regret, only with gratitude for the courage it took to walk away and begin again. The journey continued, not as an escape from the past, but as a celebration of the future I had created for myself.